You would think hunters would hate this book. And yet, hunters like the book. And we're going to be talking about that and the legacy of this little book and the movie that inspired it. British author John Galsworthy wrote the original introduction to the English edition of Felix Salten's Bambi, ending it with recommending this book to any sportsman. Felix Salten himself was an avid hunter. It seems weird to have hunters be such a destructive force in your novel, being a hunter yourself, but it makes sense for the turn of the 19th and 20th century. The history of nature conservationism in America at least began with President Theodore Roosevelt. There's a joke with history buffs that Teddy made nature reserves just so he has a place to shoot things, and that's not that far off the marker. He wrote memoirs over the years, including some stories of hunting deer, but also having one as a pet, he put a little collar on with a bell. Hunters, even big game trophy hunters in the beginning, were some of the forerunners in conserving nature, stemming from this idea that man has connected and colonized most of the world at this point, and it's now the job of man to preserve that world.
The Amazon rainforest, often called the planet's lungs, is struggling to breathe.
Hunters like the book, but you know who really hated the book? The Nazis. Felix Salten's name was actually Sigmund Solzmann. He was Jewish, and his family moved to Vienna, Austria, after the city had this super liberal progressive idea of giving Jewish citizens equal rights. That lasted for about 50 years when Austria was annexed and joined Nazi Germany in 1938, where Bambi was banned and burned, making original Austrian first editions of the book hard to find. Salten moved out into Switzerland, where he lived rather peacefully till his death in 1945. While hunters and non-hunters enjoyed the book, the opposite cannot be true for the movie. Some hunters hated the movie when it came out, and that hate only grew over the years. The first most vocal was editor of Outdoor Life magazine Raymond Brown, who wanted a disclaimer put in the beginning of the movie that the hunters in the movie don't follow the conservation laws at the time. He didn't get a lot of support for a Disney boycott, but there was a negative outlook on the movie. But you know who really liked the movie? The Nazis. That's not entirely true. In 1938, before World War II, Roy Disney was trying to sell Snow White to Germany's Ministry of Propaganda to allow the movie to be shown in German theaters. It was eventually approved after some backlash that there were too many American movies in German theaters, overshadowing the supposedly superior movies made in Nazi Germany. Nevertheless, Snow White became one of Hitler's favorite movies. Being based on a German fairy tale, he believed it showcased the ideal type of Germany that he wanted to create. A Germany that was under the reign of a ruthless, vain authoritarian leader that had no qualms ordering people to kill children. I think you succeeded in that, Hitler. While there's no proof that he liked Bambi in particular, he was known to have Disney's movies sent to him privately. In 2006, watercolor paintings were discovered to have been painted by the man himself. There's a great irony to be had that the idea of German exceptionalism was being overshadowed by an American company influenced by Chinese art and based on stories written by Jewish authors, where now an entire award ceremony is presented for German artists based on that same author's work that you tried to erase from existence.
What's the matter? Never seen a deer in the headlights.
Surprise! Where are they? Where'd you see them? Give me a sign.
Here's the sign. Deer crossing, mother.
And back to the US. Over the years, when Bambi's popularity grew, the Bambi Effect started to take place. There was an increasing awareness to the environment and a growing sympathy for the animals that live there after the movie came out. But people began to develop housing in more rural and forested areas during the middle of the 20th century, driving animals out of their home.
He is here again. There are many this time,
including predators, making deer and other populations grow from about 300,000 100 years ago to an estimated 30 million. So new conservation laws were being rewritten in the 1980s to ironically thin out populations to save the population.
So you see, we have to kill animals or else they'll die.
There were huge backlashes against it. It took a good number of years for a compromise to be made, and for the most part, hunters abide by the rules following the footsteps of those hunter conservationists before them. The hunters in the movie are hunting outside of deer season, effectively making them poachers. Like this guy, who is now in jail for poaching deer and as an added bonus made to watch Bambi once a month during his time. That's a minor punishment compared to the poacher in the Soviet Union that killed the deer that played Bambi in their version. Okay, yeah, so the Soviet Union, they made their own version of Bambi and a sequel, and it's just weird. Like, it's live action where sometimes the animals are played by animals, other times it's people in costumes, and I think there's some kind of communist deer revolution in the end. I'm at a loss. I don't speak Russian. I couldn't find an English translation, but I did find an old newspaper that talked about how someone actually did kill the fawn that was playing Bambi in the movie. He was sentenced to 5 years at a freaking gulag. It's pretty messed up, Soviet Union. Disney's Bambi affected generations of children over the years, starting with Bambi's voice actor Donnie Dunnigan refusing to ever shoot an animal after watching the movie. He lived by that even while he made a career in the Marine Corps. That sentiment grew over the years. While the movie showed how fragile nature can be when man goes rampaging about, it was much more simplistic than the novel, which has hunters doing terrifying things that Disney never showed, but also showed that hunters are more of a part of the ecosystem than a disruptive force outside of it. There is a very poignant scene at the end that has Bambi begin to understand that. Like I said in part 1, I'm not going to spoil that ending. I started this channel as a way to talk about books and adaptations and the interwoven bits of history that go along with them. And I never read this book until I started doing this video, and I'm glad I did because this is now one of my favorite books, and I can't recommend it enough. Next month is October, and this being such a big project, I'm gonna go easy and pick something light and festive for the holiday. This is C.B. Smith, and thanks for taking a page.